Now, this year marks 65 years since the 1956 Women's March to the Union Buildings, as you've just heard. Now, the month also takes place during a year under the theme, the year of Charlotte Mannya Maxeke, realizing women's rights. We speak to several women on the show about what the month means to them and also look at their successes as women in South Africa. Now, joining us is multi-award-winning author, businesswoman and philanthropist Angela Makholwa-Moabelo. Angela, thank you so much for your time. Now, I know you are currently on holiday celebrating this long weekend, but you had to be on air because this is a very, very important topic to you.
Indeed, it is, Unati. I'm actually on a women's retreat here with a group of women, and we are focusing on, building each other and just sharing insights to help develop each other. So, this is well within the theme, but this is what I try to kind of devote my life's work, whether through the work that I do as an author, as a writer, or through my work at Bright Spark Communications, as well as my philanthropic efforts.
Now, let's start about the time that you started your business. It was 19 years ago. I mean, what were the conditions like back then? And if you can compare it to today's times, what would you say are the key learnings during this time?
Sure, Unati. I started the business when I was about 26 years old. And, the public relations industry, first of all, was there were very few Black women, in the industry. And the agencies that were taken seriously by corporates, which were kind of my key target audience and still is to this day, there were a lot of barriers to entry because obviously as a young woman, you were questioned about your experience, your knowledge, and you had to always prove yourself like a 10,000-fold. In terms of what's happening now, it's changed a lot. There's a whole lot more companies in the space, more women of color in the space, and just more, and obviously the media, which is the main platform that we use to actually promote the brands that we represent, has changed so much. You've got social media, there's so much noise going on, but also there's stronger voices, and there's a need for kind of that deeper connection and more authenticity. When you talk about a brand, you need to have a more authentic voice, which I think is quite incredible because as women, we are kind of that kind of species that is devoted to truth telling. So I think it's actually been an incredible journey and an amazing journey for myself and women in the space that I operate in.
Now, it's important that you mentioned truth telling, and I just want to stay on that point. We are celebrating 65 years on following that 1956 march where thousands of women took on their struggle and decided to fight the system. Now, we are in, a similar trend. It's somewhat different from what they were fighting, but we're still in that arena as women where we are still fighting for our basic human rights in some quarters. I mean, one of the things that was said in our previous reports is that women are now in an opportune position today, better than the women of yesteryear, where they can now start telling their stories and being loud and just, shaking the system of oppression. What are some of the things that you are learning, from what we've seen in the 1956 year where those women bravely took on that system, and some of the things that you think we should be taking on now as women?
Yeah, I think it's incredible, and I feel actually quite fortunate to, walk in the footsteps of such giants. And right now, I believe that as women, we need to take the struggle not only to the boardroom, but we need to take it to the streets as well as to the household. Because, for instance, one of the things that we're doing through our foundation, the African Child Shelter for Abused Women and Children, is that we've actually established an emergency shelter for women in distress, women who are running away from gender-based violence, because I think systematically we cannot expect change to happen at a macro level if as individuals we cannot take time to find ways, small ways in which we can be agents for change. So I think, for instance, just empowering a woman who's come from, that kind of abusive relationship to have the skills, first of all, to be able to operate in the world, because often women stay, for instance, in those kind of relationships because they rely on the income of the breadwinner. So through the shelter, for instance, we not only take them in so that they are away from this situation of violence from an intimate partner, but once they are staying with us, we bring people like yourself, for instance. We'd like to bring somebody like you, for instance, to empower them, motivate them, build their confidence, and also just basic skills so that they can go out into the world and create their own income. So for me, the biggest takeout is that, those women led the way, but what are we doing in our small or even big ways to actually continue being a force for this positive change? Because it doesn't end there. I mean, if we don't empower, especially women, for instance, in the township and rural areas who may not have access to even the kind of information and the tools that we have, then we're not doing much. It's not enough for me to build a brand or build a company or write books. I feel like we should do as much as we can with the resources that we have to actually be engineers for a positive impact.
Talking about resources that we have, I mean, we are in a pandemic, in the middle of a pandemic, and one of the things that, this pandemic has shown us in South Africa specifically is the inequality, in this country. But women are yet again found right at the bottom of the barrel. I mean, where do you think, government can play a role here, or even women, us? Where do you think we can play a role? Because, I mean, there's some key lessons that were learned, during this time where we've seen that we're still fighting the same fight that was fought many years ago.
I think government through legislation has already taken some of the positive steps that we need. I mean, on paper, women-owned businesses, for instance, are to be favored in terms of business opportunities. But we need to see corporates as well coming on board and really, putting their money where their mouths are and saying that we do believe in the intellectual capacity of women-owned businesses and the physical capacity of women-owned businesses to be able to deliver, the goods or the kind of services that are out for the taking. And then also from just at an individual level, as I said, that it's women like us who do have access to information and whatever resources that we have to go out there and go back. I mean, I'm literally going back to my hometown. The shelter that we've started is in my hometown in Tembisa, and say, after 19 years of being in business, how do I now see some trickle down effect of the things that I've learned and make a change from the spaces that I'm coming from. So I think, the value of having exposure to business and contacts and things like that, I think we need to now take it back to where we come from and try and make changes in whatever ways we can.
Angela, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Always a pleasure speaking to you. I wanted to touch on, you as an award-winning author, but unfortunately we have run out of time. But thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
All right. Thank you for having me, and happy Women's Day to you.
Fantastic.